The first reading is the longest in the whole year. We had the shorter version today, but it's the whole saga of this poor lassie, Susanna. It actually is coupled normally with the gospel which this year we had yesterday. That other lady who was being accused and was about to be stoned for adultery. In its place, we have today the reading about light and darkness, about recognizing the Lord. And I'd like to dwell on that for a few seconds. Each one on earth is tending towards that light or that darkness. We sometimes talk about the fundamental option. Is there a fundamental yes or no to the light in the soul before me? It's a big issue because we can't escape it. People try to, but they can't. And what happens is that they're secretly tormented by their conscience, which can't really get away from the issue. Why? It's put there by God. And C.S. Lewis, the great writer, he explains that actually that is one of the proofs of his existence, that wherever one goes on this planet, one sees this written law people can't get away from. The conscience works. It can be dulled and is dulled by a continual refusal of light and the hardening of the heart. People escape by distracting themselves just to avoid the issue. Interestingly enough, before dying of cancer, one of the Beatles, George Harrison, was interviewed, and he answered honestly, actually, to each question, including the question of why they got involved with drugs. And he put it this way: the human soul is hurting. Life hurts. And so it tries to lessen the pain. Interesting. It was honest, and it sums up what many young people actually do. But the pain is there. With regard to light and what we do with it, I'd like just very briefly to dwell on two cases. One had everything going for him in human history, the other absolutely zero. The one who had everything going for him, perhaps helped by Satan himself because of the harm it did, was Adolf Hitler. He was, at the time, the most powerful man on earth, with Stalin as a close second. And he, towards the end, started to realize that he wasn't going to win. First of all, on two fronts, he realized he wasn't going to win. The Eastern Front was going to collapse. But then, of course, right at the end, he saw that the whole thing was collapsing, and he had this bunker built in Berlin. And we know from testimony that in the last days, the only real subject discussed down there was the best way of committing suicide. And we know also how Hitler gave orders that there be no trace of his body or that of his, mistress stroke wife either, and it had to be burnt. And they had a great job burning it because fuel was short. So that was his end. He took simultaneously cyanide and shot himself. Eva Braun just took the cyanide, I believe. There was no need for anything else. Now, it didn't stop there. Of course, for him it did, and he thought that was the end of it. But alas, he's reappeared after death in exorcism, not visibly, but audibly. He has, with others who have been obliged to mention who they are, one would be Cain, who killed his brother Abel, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed the Lord, the Emperor Nero, who did an awful lot of damage to the early church. These have been obliged, actually in Germany, to come out in exorcism in a soul that they were inside. Human demons can actually do that. And Hitler had the same accent, the Austrian accent that he had. Ja, ich bin Hitler. And it was quite clearly him. So he was down there. He didn't make it on the other side. So from the burning of his body, it went to the burning of his soul. And whenever one is down there, it's only just beginning. Today, tomorrow, it's only just beginning. Can you see how frightening that would be for a soul waking up there? Okay, he had everything. He wrote history in the last century by living it, making it happen. The other is a nobody. Nothing at all going for him. A Negro by the name of Claude Newman. He was brought up by his grandmother, who had married again, and the man that she had was not good to her. And he loved his grandmother and got to a point where he couldn't take it anymore and actually killed him. Eventually he was found by the law and put in prison. We're going now to the period when the death penalty was all over the States, still there in some places, and he was to be electrocuted. That was a great method in those days, the electric chair. But something happened. He didn't know how to read or write, he didn't know anything about prayer, he had nothing whatsoever, and I mean nothing. But there was this chap who was a criminal in prison with him, and he had this thing around his neck. What's that thing? Well, have it, do it on the floor. And it was a medal. It was the miraculous medal. So, around, he went to sleep on his bunk or whatever they had in prison. And about midnight, he woke up. He saw the most beautiful lady you could imagine above him, and she said to him he had to get hold of a Catholic priest. So he did so. Got under the chaplain of the prison, asked to be instructed in the Catholic faith. She had also said to him, "Would you like me to be your mother?" And it seemed that she also taught him things in that encounter, because he had more than they were giving him in the lessons of catechism. He would interrupt things with things he knew already. How do you know that? She told me. So eventually the chaplain caught on. There was more to this man than meet the eye. He had some kind of experience. He had been completely changed by this encounter with this fantastically beautiful woman. And he couldn't wait to meet her, so he was looking forward to the electric chair. There was this other chap in there, his name was Hughes, I think Jim, and he was awful. He was actually a lapsed Catholic. And he blasphemed, swore, and he was really nasty to this black convert. Well, what happened? The time came for the first one, Claude, to be put in the electric chair. The seconds were going by, and he was getting ready. And he was ready, and he wanted to go. He'd by then received the sacraments, and he was ready to go to meet this lovely woman. But the sheriff came up the stairs and said, "Reprieve! Reprieve!" Oh, what's all this about? Apparently, the thing has been going to the High Court. They were trying to make an appeal for him. So there was another short period, but in this time, he broke into tears, and he couldn't understand why. "If you've seen her, you don't know what it is." And he explained that he couldn't wait to see her, and he just wanted to go, didn't want to live anymore. So the chaplain went up to him, and he was in bits, and he had this inspiration from the Holy Spirit. remember that Jim guy? Why don't you offer this pain that you have for his conversion? Yeah, that's a good idea. So he took it on board. So he used all the interior pain of not being able to meet the lady to ask for the conversion of that Jim who was horrible to him and to everyone else. So eventually, the time came. The appeal was refused, and into electric chair he went. And even the local newspaper commented that he went into it and into beyond, beaming. He was just ecstatic. He was going to see that beautiful woman. So he went off like a rocket. Nothing at all. A Negro who couldn't read or write. Some time later, it was time for the other one, Jim, to go into that same chair. Of course, in those days, and actually still happens, they tried to get a chaplain to prepare the soul. He was therefore nominally a Catholic, and they got the same chaplain. And he wouldn't hear a bit of it. He would just blaspheme, swear, and they wouldn't even look at the priest. They tried to use actually the doctor of the prison to get through to him calmly, and he just spat at him. So he was going into the electric chair, blaspheming at the top of his voice. And just a few seconds to go before they put the current on. And he was there in the chair. Ah! Get me a priest! A priest! So everyone was stunned. At that point, the chaplain had had to hide himself because he knew the reaction, and he came out of the woodwork. He went right next to him in the electric chair, whispered, and he made his confession in the electric chair. They cleared the place where that happened so that no one could hear a thing. And then they came back, and the sheriff in their midst, and the sheriff whispered in the chaplain's ear, "What made him change?" "I don't know, didn't ask him." "Well, if you don't, I will. I won't sleep a wink if I don't find out." He went up to the man in the electric chair. "Jim, what made you change?" "Do you remember that Claude guy, the one I hated so much?" "Well, he's there, right in the corner. And behind him, with her hands on his shoulder, is the Blessed Virgin Mary. And he said to me, 'Jim, I obtained this grace for you, that at this moment you would be shown your place in hell.' I've just seen my place in hell, and that's why I screamed." So he, by a few seconds, avoided all eternity, where Hitler is now, and by the offered suffering of Claude, who was nothing, made it to heaven by the power of absolution. So many Catholics dull the conscience with drugs and consolations, but miss the grace they have, the only thing that can get them to heaven, the precious